The third and final season of the Norse Netflix mythology series Ragnarok is finally here. Will we see a glorious battle between giants and gods? And who will emerge as victors? Everything has led to this. As an epic final battle of gods against giants draw near, Magne's fortitude will face its ultimate trial. So I've mostly enjoyed the series from the get-go. We follow some high schoolers that discover they're more than just human. Magne, the main character, is a representation of Thor. His half-brother Loritz is Loki, and they go up against a clan of giants who rule their town from a power and financial standpoint. This has had a very environmental bent to it, focusing on corporate pollution and lack of consequences for the perpetrators. This final season still has a tiny bit of that, but the focus shifts greatly to follow Magne as he wields his hammer and attempts to defeat the giants. Now, there's a lot of filler in this season, and the direction of the story seems to be a bit scattered. A bunch of drama unfolds between Magne, Signy, and Saxa, and while it works for the teenage angst theme, some of it feels blown out of proportion to keep the episodes lengthy. Now, some of the drama between them does add to the narrative, and it helps build tension, but there's a lot of hemming and hawing that feels circular and going nowhere. There's also story distraction when it comes to the characters. Iman, one of the gods, goes off to take part in a reality TV show. Now, luckily, we don't see that show, which I think then would be completely off point, but there are segments that follow Iman and what she's doing away from the town of Edda, and it's completely unnecessary for the story that's being told to us. She's gone. That's all we really need to know. Watching her do promo shots or publicity junkets, they don't add anything to the storyline. I do like that we get even more with Loritz this season, though. The second season began to focus on him more, and here he feels like a main player, along with Magne. Now, we get to watch several sides of his personality come out, and I think he convincingly creates an emotional draw for his character. We get to see a parental side to him, but also a massive vulnerability as he stands up for himself and deals then with the consequences. I also like his interactions with Jens. There's a maturity that we get to witness that shows massive character growth from the impetuous teenager Loritz has typically been. Now, as was teased and shown a bit at the end of Season 2, the Midgard serpent that Loritz birthed is shown more here. There are parts where we get to see the creature from this top-down perspective, and the graphics, they look pretty good and realistic. I mean, we can see the size and the scale of Little O, as Loritz calls it, but when we get to see portions of it come out of the water, that's when the visuals fall apart. The graphics are extremely fake-looking, even though the creature design is cool. And I like how menacing and grotesque the design is. But all illusion is broken because the shading, the texture, and the movements are clearly animated. I would have preferred the less is more approach to keep the ominous feeling that accompanies only seeing the shadows and then very minimal views while it swims along. This is only 6 episodes long, just like the other 2 seasons. And for the most part, the pacing is efficient and moving. I mean, even if there are filler areas to the story. There does seem to be a lot of repetition when it comes to Magne, though. He's got his hammer, and possessing it becomes a large part of his personality. While there's a very cool angle here that is only briefly touched upon and not really examined as fully as it could be, there are many moments that are absolutely ridiculous. There are multiple scenes where Magne points the hammer at someone in this weirdly threatening way, and we hear this small sound effect like a shimmer or maybe a sword coming out of its sheath when he raises the hammer, and then he stares in a menacing and slightly unhinged manner, but it comes across more silly than anything. And the people he's pointing it at look like they're afraid. Maybe that's accurate because you have this dude pointing a giant sledgehammer at them with this odd expression on their face. But from an audience perspective, this wasn't tense or even dangerous looking. It was humorous and odd, breaking any dread that was supposed to be created. There's a lot of brooding also that Magne does, which is great for the moral dilemma that he's facing, but he's constantly having to reevaluate where his priorities lie and reconcile those with his desires. We also observe a lot of drama in the giant family. Saxa, Ron, and Fjord all have their own angst, which begin to become interesting, but was consistently thwarted by story conveniences and then poor complications. There's also a considerable focus on Ron and her sense of being, including safety and the role within her family. But it's pretty impotent when everything pans out. Her storyline was building to something that never comes to fruition. And it could have been more impactful if we'd seen just a little bit more following the climax, but it just drifts off without consequence. Even if everything in the series was executed flawlessly, the ending completely undoes all of it. And I'm not going to discuss what goes on because it is a massive spoiler, but for all the time investment that's been given to this story, the end, it's not only disappointing, but it's lazy and cheap. I seriously doubt many are going to enjoy the wrap-up and the conclusion. I mean, there's some good build-up, and I did enjoy the visuals that are showcased in the finale, but once everything is said and done, I felt cheated out of a proper ending. I think this would have been better served by being revealed a little earlier so that we could see the full ramifications of the resolution, and then it would have created better context, which I think then would have made the ending more tolerable. So overall, the third season of Ragnarok flails as it tries to find direction and story conclusion. There are too many tangents that lead nowhere of consequence, creating filler and fluff for the episodes. The angst of the characters can work in certain situations, but by the end, it's all made futile thanks to the shoddy and convenient resolution, making the entire series a giant waste of time. Some elements would be excellent as character studies had the story chosen to follow through on its premise, but in the end, the potential is destroyed by unnecessary melodrama and narrative tangents that don't reward what was promised. There's no sex or nudity, a lot of profanity, and some violence. I give Season 3 of Ragnarok 2 out of 5 couches. So if you've been a fan of this series, do you have a favorite character? For me, it's a hard choice, but I think Loritz is now my favorite. Let me know yours, though, in the comments below. If you enjoyed this review, please give it a like. Also, don't forget to share and subscribe. I'm Chris. This is Movies and Munchies. Thanks for couching with me.